Now, residents of Masalachi in Tangaza local government area in Sokoto State have reported seeing terrorists fleeing forest after attacks by the United States. Thank you for joining us, Ferdinand. Bring us up to speed on what's going on right there.
All right, thank you so much. And yes, it is the sojourner to ensure that we get exactly the details of what happened on Christmas Day. In the last 48 hours, where we have been going around Sokoto State, well, particularly to places where we did feel the effect. And yes, we went to Jabo in Tambawa local government area, and today we are in Tangaza, where we can confirm to you that is indeed the hub of Lakurawa activities here in Sokoto State. Now we are talking about where the attacks were indeed meant to hit, and we can confirm that yes, the locations were struck. Now,
breaking news. Could this be the end of terrorism in Nigeria? After the US airstrike, terrorists are reportedly fleeing Sokoto. Reports indicate that terrorist elements are fleeing parts of Sokoto following a United States airstrike, an action that has sparked intense debate across the country, whether this was direct intervention or strategic cooperation. One thing is clear: external pressure has forced a renewed seriousness in Nigeria's fight against terrorism. For many Nigerians, this moment underscores a painful reality. Years of nonchalant attitude and weak enforcement allowed terror networks to thrive. The positive signal here is that the Nigerian government now appears compelled to confront terrorism decisively across all regions without excuse or selective enforcement. Second breakdown: the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, has condemned what it describes as double standards by the United Kingdom in relation to the case of Nnamdikanu. This criticism goes beyond one individual. It reopens a broader debate about how international powers selectively engage Nigeria's internal crisis. In this view, if global powers can actively engage Nigeria on terrorism, then other fundamental national issues must also be addressed holistically, including the long-standard grievances surrounding the structure and unity of Nigeria itself. I mean, it is a time for renegotiation of Nigeria's unity. There is a growing argument that serious dialogue and negotiation about Nigeria's union can no longer be postponed. Supporters of nnamdikanu insist that the story of Biafra, the historical trauma, and the fears of the Igbo people must be properly heard. Unresolved injustice often creates unpredictable outcomes. At a time, there is concern that recent military actions against terrorists are being misinformed, or should I say misinterpreted, by some as an attack on Islam rather than a terror groups. A narrative that we all know could dangerously inflame tensions and create room for further conflict if not carefully managed.
Now, more briefly on why IPOB is accusing the UK of double standard as regards to Nnamdi Kanu's case. Now, let's break it down more. IPOB's accusation against the United Kingdom is not in any way coming from emotion alone. It is rooted in strategy, history, and political messaging. First, Nnamdi Kanu's past ties to the UK form the backbone of the argument. Kanu lived in the UK, as a UK citizen, and operated openly before his arrest. IPOB believes that if a person with such a connection to the UK can be seized abroad and returned to Nigeria arbitrarily without formal extradition processes, then the UK's commitment to protecting residents and upholding international law appears selective. From their perspective, silence equals consent. Secondly, IPOB is highlighting what it sees as unequal application of human rights principles. The UK frequently speak out when activists, journalists, or opposition figures are detained in other parts of the world. By contrast, the UK's restrained response in Kanu's case creates the impression, rightly or wrongly, that African cases receive less urgency unless Western interests are directly affected. Thirdly, the claims have a political and diplomatic purpose. By accusing the UK of double standards, IPOB aims to, first, to push more, or should I say, internationalize Kanu's case. Secondly, put moral pressure on Western governments. And third, frame Nigeria's action as part of a broader global injustice rather than a domestic legal matter. And this shifts the conversation from Nigeria's courts to international credibility. Fourth, IPOB is also responding to Nigeria's terrorism designation of the group. Since IPOB is not proscribed in the UK, they see the UK's refusal to challenge the Nigeria's label as quite endorsement. From IPOB's standpoint, this looks like the UK choosing diplomatic convenience over legal consistency. And we should not forget, Nnamdikanu was heard in court saying, "You think if the Britain asks you to jail me, you can jail me." So these are in the public domain. And finally, there is a communication strategy at play. Accusing a powerful Western country of hypocrisy resonates strongly with human rights groups, diaspora communities, and international media. It keeps the issue alive globally and prevents it from, fading into a purely Nigerian legal processes or affair. In essence, IPOB is making the claim because it believes the UK silence undermines its global human rights posture, and because calling out that silence is one of the few tools IPOB has to apply.
Wike versus Fubara, another news headline. Fubara and Wike fights continues in Rivers State. The former Rivers State Governor, Nyesom Wike, has issued a blunt political warning, stating that joining the APC does not guarantee a second term. A message clearly directed at Governor Siminalayi Fubara and other politicians watching the unfolding drama in Rivers State. This development raises serious questions about whether another political crisis is brewing in Rivers, as signs suggest that the long-standing system of godfatherism is gradually losing its grip. What we are witnessing may be a rare moment where entrenched political control is being openly challenged, potentially reshaping power dynamics in the state. So Nigeria is once again at a critical intersection of injustice. Let's take a look.
We've spoken to some of the villagers, and also some of the traders, because this is a route. After here, from this point, you cross over, and then it leads on to Niger Republic, well, then leads on to Ghana, leads on to Burkina Faso, leads on to Mali. And from exactly what they've told us, exactly how much travelers from the Sahel, well, you want to call them travelers, or how much migrants from the Sahel have indeed been a destruction to the community, where there's so much fear in the air, so much fear in the air. But then from what they've told us, well, they can confirm that yes, clearance activities are taking place just behind us in some of the forest. Well, they mentioned the Kawuri forest, and then also they mentioned the is it Malgam forest, where the actions place, talking about the strikes. And then also some gentlemen told us about the movements of terrorists. Now, they actually described how they had moved from one part of the forest, where they call the north, to, of course, another place. So that's the situation.
You all agree with me that so many people don't want to talk about Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, particularly in our own part of the zone. In our own part of the zone, it was difficult. But what's happened? We all agree. Listen, in politics, if you must take a decision, you can never be here. No, you must take a decision. You can't be in front and back at the same time. You cannot be at the center and left at the same time. You must be in one place. Some of us were arguing. Is it not Suicide Squad that we are going in? Are you sure our political future is not finished? But remember, I told you, I do know that God will not disappoint us. That time it was difficult for many people to say, vote for Asiwaju. It was difficult. We in Rivers State here, we said no, we must vote for Asiwaju. And we voted. And we said, look, for the presidency, we'll go for Asiwaju. And we did it. And we said for the other positions, we'll go for the PDP. We are only one state. And we have told anybody, if any governor says, I'm strong, I can deliver the president, let me tell that governor, stay in your party, deliver Asiwaju, and then deliver the governorship and the other ones. We shall sign. We are not like that. I will not be like that. So we have taken a decision long before now. Not today, that we continue to support Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
The only thing I say is that somebody will take that when you say your mandate to stand, that gives you automatic ticket. And that one I said, no, that does not give any automatic ticket. You have to work, you have to earn the ticket for you to be able to represent your people. So many governors have left I have been accused, if you remember, so many governors have accused me that I'm working for APC to be able to destroy PDP. But the same people have also left Unity to go to APC. So I'm not surprised that my governor had to go to APC. No, I'm not surprised. It doesn't mean my clearance. I'm not the owner of APC.
Now, this is our commentary about this whole thing. Reports of terrorists fleeing parts of Sokoto following a US airstrike signal something Nigeria has lacked for years: credible pressure. Whether symbolic or strategic, the action has altered the psychology of terror groups that had grown comfortably under years of weak enforcement and delayed response from the government. The key takeaway is not foreign involvement alone, but what it has triggered: a renewed seriousness within Nigeria's own security architecture. Years of nonchalant attitude toward terrorism allowed these groups to entrench themselves. That era must end. However, fear alone is not a solution. Intelligence coordination, continuous tracking, arrest, prosecution, and dismantling of financial and logistical networks must follow. Terrorism must be treated as a national security threat, not a regional, ethnic, or religious issue. Anything less risk allowing these groups to regroup again and mutate under new identities. Now, talking about the issue of Nnamdikanu, IPOB's criticism of United Kingdom double standard over the case of Nnamdikanu is actually opening a long-standing debate about selective justice in Nigeria. If global powers can, engage decisively on terrorism, then issue of justice, like I said, self-determination, human rights must also not be treated as secondary. I mean, globally, the Kanu case has become symbolic, less about one man and more about unresolved historical grievances, perceived marginalization, and failure to address Nigeria's structural contradictions. The argument here is not chaos, but dialogue, a comprehensive and honest engagement with the Nigerian Union itself. And this is why I believe that the USA and Israel should engage the Biafra question. Number one is human rights consistency. Global powers cannot credibly defend human rights while ignoring long-standing grievances tied to mass suffering and repression. Secondly, historical trauma. The Biafran experience remains unresolved. Unresolved trauma breeds instability. Third, justice as prevention. Dialogue reduces the likelihood of radicalization more effectively than force alone. Fourth, rule of law. Extraordinary rendition and prolonged detention undermine democratic norms. So that should be visited too. Fifth, regional stability. Nigeria's internal instability has West African consequences, so it should be visited. Sixth, early warning signs. Ignoring political grievances often precede violent escalation. Seventh, forced unity question. Stability cannot rest permanently on coercion. Nigerians were forced to be one, so the question of its unity should be negotiated. We talk about number 8, moral leadership. Engagement threatens global credibility. 9, conflict de-escalation. Negotiation lowers temperature of ethnic and regional tensions. 10, future security. Sustainable peace comes from inclusion, not suppression. So this is not an argument for violence or disorder, but a warning. Issues left unresolved do not disappear, they transform. On the issue of Wike versus Fubara, the statement by former Governor Nyesom Wike that joining the APC does not guarantee a second term is more than political advice. It is a public display of diminishing influence. What once functioned as a tightly controlled political structure built on godfatherism is now visibly under strain, under heavy attack. Governor Siminalayi Fubara appears to have crossed a psychological and political threshold. The instrument of intimidation and control that once kept the reverse political space in check are no longer effective. Power has shifted, and with it, loyalty has realigned. At this very stage, Wike's influence is nothing but largely rhetorical. The governor is no longer operating from within Wike's political enclave, and the ongoing confrontation reflects on a man struggling to retain relevance in a system that has already begun to move on. Politics demands timing, knowing when to advance, when to negotiate, and when to step aside, when to dance, and when to stop dancing. Power is never permanent. An attempt to hold it indefinitely often end in isolation, and that is the case of Wike and Fubara. Here's the message. Nigeria, as we speak, is at a very terrible moment where power is shifting, fear is changing sides, and long ignored questions are demanding answers. From Rivers State, where political godfatherism is visibly weakening, to the north, where terrorism is finally being confronted with seriousness, and to the southeast, where unresolved grievances continue to echo through the case of Nnamdi Kanu. The message is very clear. This country can no longer afford selective action or selective justice. Force alone will not secure peace, just as silence will not erase historical pain. True stability will come, like I said, only when security is matched with justice, power is balanced with accountability, and the unity is built on consent, not coercion. Nigeria must decide whether it wants temporal calm or lasting peace.
So that is all for tonight.
This is about perspectives, your domain for unfiltered news and raw political analysis. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and of course subscribe to this channel so you'd always get an insight on filtered and raw political analysis, and leave us with your opinion. Drop your comments. Let's understand what you feel about this very development. Don't forget to also share and like this video, and of course, thank you for your time and thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.